And I've got somebody standing here in front of the camera, please. Thank you very much indeed. Good morning. This is Schutten from the COP26 Peatland Pavilion. It's really great to have you here in our session. And today, on Monday the 8th, we're going to have another full day sharing success stories. Sharing success stories not only about peat and peatland recovery, but also how peatlands and peatland restoration and peatland protection ties in with the NDCs, ties in with climate change reduction and emission reduction and mitigation. I'm sorry, I had a long weekend, so it's not always that easy to get straight in the first thing in the morning. So over the last week, we had a really good week looking at success stories, looking at the NDCs and how NDCs ties in with peatlands, but also looking at the technology behind there, looking at the finance, which is critical on how we actually move forward and implement all these projects. Because remember why we are here. It's the reason Ramsar report made it very clear that by 2050, we need to restore 50 million hectares of drained peatland globally to be able to meet the Paris Agreement targets. 50 million hectares. So we need to get cracking on with that. We really need to push this forward. And to be able to do that, we need to make sure that it's enshrined in the NDCs, which is a really good step. And we're here to help and to stimulate and motivate countries to do that. But besides that, we also need to make sure that all those pledges, all those nationally determined contributions are turned into action. And that's why this session is called We Walk the Talk, Inspiring Peatland Restoration Success Stories in Russia and the Congo, because it's there that we really need to think about. It's turning those ambitions into reality on the ground. We as Wetlands International have got a really good track record and knowledge and experience on how to do that. And together with the partners here in our Peatland Pavilion that is organized and that is centered around the Global Peatland Initiative, we're really pleased to have you here. And thank you for joining us in this online session. It's great to have you here today. And as I said, we've got some really inspiring success stories from two distant parts of the world. We start in the first 45 minutes with two case studies from Russia. And a good colleague of mine, Tatiana Minayeva, who is an associate expert of Wetlands International, will be introducing and moderating those two. So that's the first 45 minutes. Then we have an inspiring case study from the Congo. And Tom Evans from the Wildlife Conservation Society. Yeah, I'm nearly right there, Tom, and I see Tom nodding here to me. He will be talking to you about the inspiring work that has been done there. And what I really hope that you take away from this session is not only that wetlands are amazing and that peatlands are amazing, but also that the action on there not only benefits the amazing wildlife, not only benefits the carbon emission reduction and the sequestration in there, but really ties in with people. Because the only way on how we can really push forward and deliver long-term restoration success of projects like the ones that we've been talking about is if we work together with the people. And the people are central in this long-term restoration success, because only that way we can do it. So without further ado, I now hand over to Tatiana Minayeva, who is going to take us through the two case studies in the Russian Federation. Tatiana, over to you.
Good afternoon in Siberia. Thank you very much, Hans. And I hope that I'm sharing the screen. So, as Hans told, there's the Russia on agenda, and why it's Russia on agenda. So, first of all, this is one of the richest country with the peat. And of course, it's not everywhere in the same way, but you see the Russia here is a very large area and very rich with the peat. But also Russia was designated as one of the largest emitters due to peatlands, drainage and other peatlands uses. And when you put on the area, it is not so crucial like in the European countries, but however, this is a lot of things to do. And there is really three hotspots in this case. We have Arctic, we have West Siberia, which Alexei will tell you about, and we have European part of Russia, which Hans will tell more you about. And I would like very shortly to tell you about Arctic because we have know this case separately, but I would like to introduce this problem. In the Arctic, peat is protecting permafrost, and this is the main issue. And if the permafrost is thawing, then we will have 1,500 gigatons of CO2 in atmosphere. So we should not destroy peat in the Arctic. And peat in the Arctic is almost all surface, because this or this way, all surface of the Arctic is covered with peat, 10 centimeters or 5 meters. And the natural peatland ecosystems are the home of indigenous people. Actually, if we destroy it, so there's a huge losses of ecosystem services. But the good news is that we can try to rehabilitate it. And when we rehabilitate it, a lot of emissions is reduced, because it's not only emissions from permafrost, from peat, but also emissions from permafrost. So to restore Arctic peatlands is very, very valuable for the climate change mitigation. And here we can see the example of the proof that under the destroyed areas, the permafrost is really thawing very, very seriously. And the other case is West Siberia. West Siberia is the area where we don't drain peatlands in a traditional way, but for the use or for digging peat, very few. But normally it is the impact of infrastructure, of the roads, of pipelines, and managing these installations better could reduce a lot of emissions. We do this project, Ugra University, with Gazprom Neft Hunters to prove this as a case study. And the third will be the Petrus project, which Hans will tell you about. And now I would like to ask organizers to put a small video about West Siberia before we give the floor to Alexei Akhlopkov, Vice Governor of Khanty-Mansiysk Autonomous Okrug Ugra. And we thank you very much, Alexei, for that you find in your very tough agenda time for this event. So please, video.
We would like to take you on a fascinating journey to the heart of West Siberia, Khanty-Mansiysk Ugra Autonomous Okrug.
Болотные угодья являются там ценнейшим ресурсом для всей планеты, и тогда, когда они сконцентрированы на одной площади Западной Сибири, Ханты-Мансийском автономном округе Игре, безусловно, как мы с вами там высокий вес имеем, потому что владеем, собственно говоря, этим ресурсом. И ответственность у нас совершенно другая, и не только перед своим регионом, а перед земляками и в стране, но и для всего мира.
Mukhrina Field Station in Khanty-Mansiysk, Russia, was established in 2009 as part of the UNESCO Chair in Environmental Dynamics and Global Climate Change of Ugra State University. The aim of the station is to study biodiversity, carbon balance, and the functioning of bog systems. Mukhrina Field Station is located in the central part of Western Siberia. 30 kilometers to the southwest of Khanty-Mansiysk, on the left bank of the Irtysh River. The experimental field station is equipped with 1 kilometer-long walkways, which cross the main mire ecosystems and facilitate researcher access to perform experiments and measurements without disturbing the ecosystems. Mukhrina Field Station is the only year-round operating station of ecological monitoring in Western Siberia. The station houses state-of-the-art equipment for research. There are automatic weather stations, devices for hydrological monitoring, a wind generator, and solar panels providing the field equipment with energy. With the help of scientists from Helsinki University, the EDI covariant system for measurement of greenhouse gases was launched in 2014. In addition to environmental monitoring, researchers manipulate water table level, temperature, and soil humidity with the help of special open-top chambers. In 2011, Mukhrina Field Station joined the International Network for Terrestrial Research and Monitoring in the Arctic, or INTERACT. Over 50 research institutes and universities conducting monitoring in northern regions took part in the project. In 2015, the station joined yet another global network, the Pan Eurasian Experiment. The main idea of Pan Eurasian Experiment consists of collecting different measurements from the whole continent and creating an open database available for any researcher studying climate change. The UNESCO Chair also offers a master's program in environmental studies and protection of biosystems. This program offers training not only in environmental issues, but also in mathematical modeling and data analysis, mapping, computer technologies, and English. The UNESCO Chair of Yugra State University has promoted a crucial link to the international scientific community. With its help, students and researchers can participate in a unique connection between climate change research at both the regional and international levels.
So, Alexei, floor is yours.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Tatiana, for the introduction. And I want to also thank all the organizers for the opportunity to talk and to take part in this session at the Glasgow conference. In my short speech, I will focus on the three main topics which we consider to be the most important for our region and overall in the context of carbon issue. The first one is the region's interest in transitioning to carbon neutrality and understanding the role of good peatland ecosystem management. The second one is the role of science and business working together and the role of the Mukhrina station in the baseline characteristics. And the third one will be the role of wetland inventory projects in the licensed areas. So I will proceed. Khanty-Mansiysk Autonomous Okrug is the largest oil and gas region in Russia, located in the center of West Siberia. It is one of the world's richest peatland regions, with peatlands covering over the 30% of the okrug's territory. West Siberia is home to the famous Vasyagинskaya bog, with an area of almost 6 million hectares. Until the recent discovery of the huge peatland in Congo, it was considered the largest Maya massif. Together with the oil extracted here, the peatlands are the main treasures of Yugra. Peatlands are unique ecosystems that play an important role in maintaining the ecological balance, act as natural filters for water, regulate runoff, and are valuable hunting grounds and pastures for the indigenous people, Khanty and Mansi. Under today's conditions, the region needs to build a strategy to achieve carbon neutrality. In doing this, the district had the advantage of having a huge concentration of peatlands on its territory. Peatland ecosystems in their pristine state store billions of tons of carbon. It is important to properly organize economic activities in such areas using spatial planning approaches and applying modern construction and development methods for roads and all these facilities. In this way, we can preserve these carbon stocks and prevent this carbon from turning into greenhouse gases and being released into the atmosphere. The Yugra peatlands are an international platform for the study of unique bog ecosystems and their role in the global carbon balance. The Khanty-Mansiysk Autonomous Okrug has accumulated a lot of experience in monitoring greenhouse gas fluxes. As Tatiana already mentioned, our international field station Mokhrina was established in 2009 by Ugra State University with the support of the Okrug government. The Mokhrina field station is a member of the International Environmental Monitoring Network, Interact, PEAX, and SEXNet, and is a scientific training ground for researchers from all over the world. As a result of the research work carried out in the Khanty-Mansiysk Autonomous Okrug Ugra, the technology for measuring greenhouse gas fluxes and assessing the sink capacity of ecosystems has improved. Thanks to this, verified published long-term data on carbon exchange, hydrology, and biodiversity are available both as a basis for creating a methodology to reduce the region's carbon footprint and for environmentally sound planning by economic entities related to the fuel and energy industries. By order of the governor of Khanty-Mansiysk Autonomous Okrug Ugra, since June 2021, an action plan is being implemented to develop and utilize a methodology to reduce the carbon footprint of the oil and gas and energy sectors of the Okrug. Related to this, Ugra has adopted a set of measures that take into account the resource specifics of the region, aimed at minimizing negative impacts of activities. There are cooperation agreements between the Khanty-Mansiysk Autonomous Okrug Ugra government and the fuel and energy companies that stipulate joint commitments toward the environment. A system for continuous observation of environmental impacts within the boundaries of the license areas and local environmental monitoring has been introduced and is being used effectively. An inventory of greenhouse gas emissions has been conducted, and the Europe EcoPassport Ugra information system has been introduced. The regional action plan roadmap on adaptation to climate change is being implemented in Zogo. The research team of Ugra State University implemented a number of research projects on the greenhouse gas budget, role of peatlands in maintaining the hydrological regime of rivers, flood and fire prevention, and biodiversity conservation in the licensed oil field areas by extracting companies, oil companies, Gazprom, Neftkhantas, and Salim Petroleum Development. Implementation of a balanced environmental protection policy in order to minimize the area's environmental footprint and of a set of other measures has made it possible to reduce greenhouse gas emissions over the past 10 years. Thus, at the moment, we assess the result as positive and consider it necessary to continue work in this direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexei. I don't see chat, unfortunately, in my system. If there are any immediate question to Alexei from Q&A, can moderators on the place help me with this? If there are any question directly to Alexei now?
Hello. Hi, Tatiana. This is Hans here from, obviously, from the from COP in Glasgow. We've got no questions so far coming into the chat, Tatiana. So what I suggest is that we go on with the next presentation. Or have you got a question for the speakers?
Okay, if there's no questions, so we move now to European part of Russia. And Hans Schutten, the supervisor of the Peatlands project, this is the short name of the long-term project restoring peatlands in Russia for fire prevention and climate change mitigation. Hans will present a short overview of the project's goals and achievements. Thank you, Hans.
Thank you, Tatiana, and welcome back again. We just heard very clearly about the risk of permafrost and the role that peatlands present and play in protecting the carbon within there and how the whole system functions. What I want to do in the next 5 minutes or so is talk to you about a specific other project quite close to Moscow. And before I do that, I actually want to take you back in your mind to 2010. 2010, the summer of 2010. Think about Moscow Red Square. The whole Red Square is filled with aqua smoke, dense aqua smoke. People have got breathing problems. Actually, in the summer of 2010, we had 50,000 excess deaths related with problems of people and their breathing. And where did that smoke come from? And the smoke come from? It came from the burning peatlands around the edge of Moscow and the surrounding areas. So the drained peatlands around Moscow not only released carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, but also created real human impact and created a lot of suffering in that area. That kickstart a cooperation between the German government and the Russian government to find the cause and to change that around. So this is not only climate change mitigation, but this is adaptation as well. So it is a really nice interplay between how we actually use rewetting to improve the health and the health benefits, work with people, but also reduce climate change, greenhouse gas emissions. So as I said, in the next 5 minutes, I want to go through the project, and it looks like we've got lots of, and it should, so these slides were made by Tatjana, which is absolutely great, and there's lots of clicks in there that I wasn't aware of, so I'm just going to pick them up. So this is the area that we talk about, large peatlands, and hopefully here, yes, we got a project now. There's a restoring peatlands in Russia for fire prevention and climate change mitigation. So the project, as I said, was initiated after the summer of 2010 and was funded by the German government and their research and their the Federal Ministry of the Environment, of Nature Conservation, Nuclear Safety, and the Federal Republic of Germany. It works together with the governments in the regions of the Russian Federation, and they are absolutely crucial because without people on the ground and without governmental support, we never would be able not only to initiate the project and to understand what we need to do, but also to deliver that on the ground. The implementing organization and the direct funding organization is KfW, which is tied in with the federal ministry in Germany and the German Development Bank. And so we got a project consortium started off from the beginning between us, Wetlands International, both in the Netherlands and in our Russian office, the Institute of Forest Science of the Russian Academy of Sciences in Russia, the Michael Suko Foundation in Germany, and Greifswald University. So there was a big international group pushing this forward. And now, this is clicking straight into a next slide. It'll make my life easier. So, as I said, the environmental background to the project, the fire in the peatlands around Moscow that were drained, in total 10 million hectares of drained peatlands in the Russian Federation. So that is a huge amount of area, but also if that catches fire, that creates real problems for people. So we got 4.5 million hectares of drained peatlands on agriculture, 4 million in terms of forestry, and 1.5 million hectares in terms of feed extraction. And it's especially the peat extraction areas that we here talk about. They've been unmanaged since the 1990s, and that's where the whole problem comes around. And I said that's created high fire vulnerability of those peatlands. They caught fire and created all these problems. So that now I don't hear the clicking, but I can see the slide changing. So that initiated a project, and what I will show you is we've got three phases in this project, but also that the project, and you've got a slide here on the left-hand side for you on the slides, and it's quite confusing standing there and seeing this thing next to me. On the left-hand side, we got a cycle of the project, whereby we first worked on inventories. That's the pie on the top left-hand side. Then through the inventories, we worked through the approach to re-wetting and restoration. So how do we do that? How do we restore these peatlands, not only for biodiversity, not only for carbon, to reduce the fire risk, but also to provide livelihood for people? Because in the end of the day, that's really important as well. We went through a re-wetting phase. And obviously monitoring is important. And I'm going clockwise into the blue segment now there with CO2. So understanding the benefit of reducing the drainage and reducing the fire risk, but also for climate change mitigation. So that's the monitoring, and we've had really good monitoring in place, and it helped us in the end to elevate the outcome of this into the Russian NDCs, the NDC for the Russian Federation. Then the next segment is knowledge and capacity building, because it's not only us that is going to implement this, but we're setting up the scene so that others, so that the governments and private business in Russia can pick this up and move this forward and implement this at scale. The next segment along is policy and outreach, because we are not doing this together. We need to make sure that what we do in this project is being picked up by the countries, not only in Russia, but for further afield, so that all the lessons learned multiply what we found here. And then the last segment is finance, because the millions that have been spent in this project, and that's 10 million plus over the last years, is not only going into the design and the knowledge building, but if we really want to upscale and implement, we need to attract further finance, and we're into that phase now. So we've got 3 phases in the project. Phase 1 is the understanding of the inventory and understanding and the method development and the specific studies. Then we go into phase 2, which was the dissemination of the experience and the implementation and the testing of the methods. So how do we do that? How do we go about re-wetting? But also what kind of crops can we grow there for people on the ground so they can make livelihoods in that? And the third phase that we are now in, and that we recently got funded by the German government, it runs into 2023, and that's implementing it. So how do we grab all that knowledge, and how do we make that work not only in the areas that we've looked at and the areas that we've mapped, but how do we export that on a much wider scale? And we're into that phase, the upscaling phase now. So if I then go to the next slide, where did we get to it? So far we built a capacity, we reduced, and the top on the right will show you the bars in green, orange and red. We've reduced the fire hazard, and we restored ecology in 20,000 hectares. That's not insignificant anymore. We reduced, we increased the climate smart re-wetting. So we re-wetted an area for climate of 65,000 hectares. And we reduced the fire risk in nearly 95,000 hectares. These are huge areas, and that's had a really significant impact on the people and the environment. If we then look at the next phase until the end of this project, by then we will have restored 35,000 hectares of peatlands. We've reduced the fire risk in 140,000 hectares and done climate smart re-wetting in another 75,000 hectares. That's all significant, and even the carbon numbers are even more significant. And my sheet is just now flying away, so I don't know the numbers of my heart. So what I see now is that in the first phases up to now, we've had up to 320,000 tons of CO2 CO2 equivalents per year being not emitted. That's significant, but by the end, we'll be sitting on 650,000 tons of CO2 emissions avoided. These are significant numbers, and that's where we're going to. So what have we done? We've understood what needs to be done. We had a cause. We had a reason to kick off the project, fires, and we knew that it came from drained peatlands. We've then taken that by the hand, and luckily enough, we found the German government to fund that, and together with our partners in Russia and in Germany, we created this project. Now we know how to re-wet it, we know how to create livelihoods, we also know the carbon benefits, and we're sitting in the cusp of upscaling, whereby we really go big and we really go large. So that's the next phase of this project, and we really look forward working with the partners on the ground, but also with businesses and wider partners to actually deliver great results. So that's me talking about the project for a good 5 or 6 minutes. If you want to look further, and there was a slide that is probably not in my, no, it's not in my thing, but it is in the one that I got sent across yesterday. If you want to look further around the project of the Peat Rus, as we call it for short, there's really good information out there. And if you follow the links to the Peatland Pavilion, which were associated with the registration with this, there are clear signs to the Peat Rus project. There's further videos, there's further information, and you can read it through at your leisure. As I said, it's an amazing project, and I've been privileged for the last 2 years to be part for that. Now I hand back to Tatjana for a series of follow-up presentations on the back of that. Tatjana, over to you.
Thank you, Hans. Yes, there was this last slide of your presentation now. We are working a lot with government, both governments, of course, and because this is the bilateral project. It was the special agreement, so-called Hanover Agreement, signed thank you, signed in 2010 to launch this project between the Russian Federation and Federal German Republic, so to work on it. And this is very good example of work of the Ministry of Nature Resources and the German Ministry cooperation, and we would like to give the floor to main partners of this. This is the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment of the Russian Federation, Mr. Nuruddin Inamov, who is currently the assistant to the minister. And then we will not make break, and the deputy head of mission of Federal Republic of Germany in Moscow, Ms. Beate Grzewski, will tell a couple of words about project. And as Hans told, we are working with business, and our first business partner in this project, actually already in the beginning of the first phase in 2016 we started to cooperate, was the International Investment Bank, with significant part of the Russian Federation in its funds. And it will be Anna Lvova, head of Department of International Relations and Communications. So please watch 3 interviews which we took specifically for this COP from these people. Thank you.
Позволю начать с истории. Проект начинался в 2010-2011 годах, и одной из причин было как раз-таки поиск решений по противодействию торфяным пожарам в Подмосковье 2010 года. И здесь изначально хочу выразить признательность нашим коллегам из Федерального министерства охраны природы, экологии и безопасности ядерных реакторов Германии, с которыми вместе начинали этот проект. И, безусловно, основным участником этого проекта это международная организация Wetlands International, Германский банк развития, КФ, российские участники, Институт лесоведения и также представители субъектов. Что удалось вкратце? В первую очередь, это обеспечить пожарную безопасность на 140 тысячах гектаров вторично обводненных торфяников. Это самое важное. То есть люди убедились в том, что проект помогает им защищать жизнь, собственность, имущество. В части климата это то, что нам удалось, во-первых, утвердить болотные экосистемы как важный компонент поглощающей способности экосистем. И мы впервые зафиксировали это, и нас поддержали в том числе коллеги из межправительственной группы экспертов по изменению климата ООН, так называемый IPCC. И в-третьих, методики, которые были отработаны на данном проекте, были утверждены, и сейчас, по сути дела, на международном уровне именно методики, выработанные в ходе этого проекта, используются международными экспертами при расчетах поглощающей способности ранее осушенных торфяников, их обводнения. Это очень важно, потому что мы понимаем, что зачастую можно предпринять целый ряд действий, но если эти действия не получают адекватную оценку, то они как бы не засчитываются. Особенно это важно на климатическом треке. Я понимаю, что мы сейчас говорим о посетителях павильона на климатической конференции, поэтому это очень важно. По объемам поглощения. Из расчетов, которые произвели наши специалисты, получается, что вторично обводненные торфяники позволяют сократить выбросы в среднем от 5 до 10 тонн на 1 гектар. И эти данные впервые вошли в национальный доклад Российской Федерации. В 2020 году мы ввели именно само понятие вторично обводненных торфяников. Так, и в этом году уже были включены и цифры. Мы пока что официально подтвержденные, которые были экспертами проекта рассчитаны, получили подтверждение от Института глобального климата имени Израиля, Росгидромета. И в национальном докладе по добровольно определяемому уровню вкладов, так называемый НДС, по торфяникам вошла цифра 49,5 тысяч тонн СО2 эквивалента. То есть это вот такие цифры. Безусловно, и это только по 4 регионам. Рассчитываю на то, что в рамках проекта будем оказывать содействие регионам, поскольку большая часть наработок, они касаются именно методик, в том числе и мониторинга экосистем. Так, это и в том числе методики подсчета поглощающей способности вторично обводненных торфяников, поскольку регионы сейчас тоже будут представлять свои отчеты. И вот эти вот методики наработаны, они очень востребованы. В национальном контексте это еще и формирование нашей национальной отчетности в рамках рамочной конвенции ООН по изменению климата, еще и отчетность по ряду других международных инструментов, включая Рамсарскую конвенцию по водно-болотным угодьям и также конвенцию о биологическом разнообразии, которая также уделяется большое внимание в рамках компонентов проекта, поскольку мы говорим не просто о том, чтобы водой залить и все, мы говорим о восстановлении целостных экосистем, в том числе включая и биоразнообразие. И сам проект рассматривается как пилотный. То есть вот эта вот наработка методик, а команда экспертов, международная команда экспертов, они позволяют достаточно убедительно утверждать о лидерских позициях России на треке по работе по поглощающей способности болотных экосистем. Поэтому я уверен в том, что у проекта хорошая перспектива. Будем работать.
I feel like it's a very important project, so it's very good that we highlight it in the movie, but we also highlight your participation, your expertise, and your expectations for the partnerships. So last year, there was a very interesting article in the Nature magazine that was published by a group of German scientists. And in that article, they said that restoring peatland ecosystems could help significantly reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. And I know that there is an ongoing project which is aimed at re-wetting peatlands in Russia, and that is also supported by the German government. Can you tell us a little more about it, and also what has been the impact so far?
I'm very glad to explain a little bit what our project is and why we think it has a good impact on the environment. As you will remember, after the large fires in 2010 around Moscow, there was an urgent need to help to improve the situation. And so Chancellor Merkel and the then President Medvedev agreed on a bilateral project in which Germany supports Russia in solving the problem of fire and methane emissions from dry peatlands by rewetting them. And the German Ministry of the Environment financed so far with nearly 10 million euros this project. And on the Russian side, we had a good partnership, or we have a good partnership with the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment. And the project is implemented by a partnership that includes German, Russian, and international partners. In my view, this project is one of the best practical examples for cooperation between our two countries. And we are glad that we have now 11 regions involved in the project, mostly in the European part of Russia. And we have also requests from other regions to join this project. In our view, this is a good sign, which means that there are already a positive impact and some effects. And the project has reduced fire hazards by rewetting about 100,000 hectares of drained peatland and restored 25,000 hectares of peatland ecosystems. The area of cooperation on the prevention and combating of climate change is an area which is very promising for the German and Russian relationship. We organize conferences, we try to participate in conferences and support some projects. And we want to highlight the many projects that are going on already between our two countries and set some impulses for new initiatives. And especially the area of nature-based solutions for climate change is something where we think is quite easily to transmit the message why it's useful to do something, why it's useful to protect nature. So people can understand, see the progress, and this is something that is most important also to get ownership and support and initiative from normal citizens that see the necessity to do something in climate change. And then maybe also get the political level interested when they see that citizens are active in this field. This is an important subject. We think it's a good example of German-Russian cooperation, and we intend to continue it.
Anna, how important are peatlands conservation projects for the International Investment Bank? And are they mainly a charity project, or the bank also invest in development, in implementation of the restoration projects?
Well, since about 2015, I think the bank has adopted the so-called grant policy. And our grants are mainly aimed at nature preservation and environmental projects. So when a few years ago we were approached by Wetlands and our colleagues from the German KfW with regards to the Peatlands restoration project, we were very curious to find more about that, because it fully corresponded with our mandated mission as a multilateral development bank. I mean, we're always looking for that value added in the projects we finance, not just from the financial point of view for them to be bankable, which is obviously a must, but the additional impact our investments would bring, be it social, environmental, or anything else they could offer. So Peatlands projects very well fitted into that category of projects which could give us that added value. Now looking back at the actually results we received, I think we could be even more proud, because that is one showcase project which we can be, which we're always very happy to talk about, and we can be really, really proud of. Our grants, as I said, like the charity, or you call them, they are mainly all aimed at environmental and nature preservation. It turned out, I think coincidentally, in the past few years, that all of them are actually aimed at the preservation of water resources. We've implemented projects and given out grants in most of our member states, be it Hungary, Czech Republic, in Slovakia, and Russia, for example, when we're talking about the Peatlands project, we actually had a very similar peatland preservation project in Mongolia. with the Mongolian Academy of Science. They looked at the wetlands project, and because it turns out, for us actually it was a big surprise that the same problem actually exists in Mongolia, that they don't use the peatland resources as such maximum. So that is something we were also very happy to discuss with the Mongolian authorities and to finance a special program aimed at that. They're actually doing scientific research with the financing that we gave them. When you look at our portfolio with regards to investment projects, actually, you will find that quite a number of them also have the environmental effect to them. We do finance implementation of new technologies, modernization of equipment in certain areas. We have a very large investment portfolio in the agricultural sector, and a lot of that is related to matters of nature preservation, to climate change, and things like that.
Wonderful. Anna, one more question. So peatlands restoration, it's not a usual topic. How did you manage to present it correctly to the board of directors and to employees of the bank? And was the link between climate agenda and peatland restoration obvious for you from the very beginning?
I wouldn't lie to you. I think from the very start, it was all a mystery to us, just to anyone else who is not in the subject. But here I would probably have to give a lot of credit to our partners from Wetlands, because the way they made us look at the problem and the way they presented the project was more than convincing for us to take it on board. Wetlands and us decided that we would actually hold an event internally for the bank employees and for everybody involved. And the event was a huge success internally, with our employees asking a lot of questions and being very genuinely interested in what we are about to do here. I think this joint work with our partners in Wetlands made us look at the problem from a different angle. And it made us absolutely sure that this is something we as a development institution should be supporting. It's a project on the territory, it was a project on the territory of Russia. For us, Russia is one of our main shareholder countries. So because the government authorities also expressed a lot of interest in the project and stressed on its value and on its importance, that was an additional factor for us to consider. We would be very pleased to have future opportunities for joint work with Wetlands, because it has proved to be an incredibly positive experience for us.
Okay, so this is all compliments to our project. I was very happy to see this. And okay, so floor to Hans. The Russian part is over. If there are some questions, so Hans, can you please manage this on the spot? Thank you very much.
Thank you for our speakers from Russia. I'm immensely proud to have been being able to be part of this project. I wasn't there at the beginning. I was there only in the last 2 years, and the work that's been done and the results that we've created, not only to reduce carbon emissions, not only to get better health and better healthily air in Moscow, but also for the people on the ground, has been incredible. We've really pushed the science forward. We've really pushed the understanding forward. We've created and recreated livelihoods for people and the positive look into the future. But also what is important for me is that we managed to take a smaller project, scale it up, but through the investment and to working with, for example, the International Investment Bank, we started to be able to lift it to that next level. And it's that next level. And as you remember, might remember at the beginning of today, I spoke about 50 million hectares of peatlands that need to be restored by 2050. It's only by this cooperation, this working together across knowledge institutes, across governments, across finances, and with the people on the ground, that we will be able to pull this off. So I have got no questions here. I think on the floor here, and looking at the moderator side of things, and we've got people sitting here in the background, we've got no direct questions coming from here. So what I propose is we go straight into Tom Evans, and then after that there is a series of questions which will come on the back of that anyway, so we got a bit of time for that. So with that, I like to go and introduce Tom Evans. And we were joking at the beginning because I said it was the Wetlands Conservation Society, and he said, no, it's not. It's the Wildlife International. It's the wildlife. So that's really interesting to see that from that perspective. I'll let Tom introduce him himself and talk about the amazing work that's been done on the other side of the world in Central Africa. Tom, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Yes, I'm Tom Evans from the Wildlife Conservation Society, and I head up our Intact Forests initiative. But I'll be speaking today on behalf of our team in the Republic of Congo, a presentation that's been put together by Guido and his colleagues. And I'm going to be talking about the Lactelle Community Reserve, which is part of the world's largest tropical peatland. It's a part of an enormous Ramsar site. And in contrast to the previous case study we've been hearing about, it's an intact ecosystem. It's not a restoration case. It's a case of avoiding the impacts before they occur. The site is very important for local communities, particularly as a source of protein from fisheries, but also for agriculture and so forth. And it's also very significant as a reservoir of biodiversity. The Republic of Congo as a whole supports about 60% of the world's gorillas, for example, and the very highest densities found anywhere in the world of gorillas can be found in the site that I'm going to talk about. So because the area is so important for community livelihoods, we've worked hard to promote natural resource governance models in this landscape, and I'll come back to talking about those in detail later. I'm going to begin by giving an overview of the site, of the overall management model, and through the course of the presentation, I hope I can highlight some of the challenges of managing an important peatland in such a remote and area, and some of the lessons which may be available for managing peat swamps elsewhere across the Congo Basin. So next slide, please. So this map gives you a sense of the geography of the area. We're right in the heart of Africa. We're on the left. In the center, you can see we're talking about the northeastern part of the Republic of Congo. And then on the right, we zoom into the landscape, the site itself. The dark green oval in the center is the current extent of Lactelle Community Reserve. The pale green blocks to the west and east are potential areas to expand that reserve over time. But I'm going to focus on the central block. And as you can see, right at the heart of it, there's a blue circle. That's Lactelle itself, Lake Telle, which is an iconic site in the Republic of Congo, and a beautiful circular disc of water in the center of a vast expanse of wetland forests. The reserve covers about 4,400 square kilometers, so it's a large area. It was created in 2001, and it's the Republic of Congo's only designated community reserve. The reserve is managed by the Ministry of Forest Economy in partnership with WCS, and of course with very significant involvement from the communities who live in and use it. There are around 20,000 people in total in around 25 to 30 villages. So the population, that's a large number of people, and it's a very important, so it's very important from that respect. Those are key stakeholders in every aspect of reserve management, but it's still quite a low human population density compared to many wetland reserves in other parts of the world. Next slide, please. So zooming out a little to put the peatlands of the reserve in context, Lactelle, which is, I was hoping to be able to point, but as you're all online, you won't be able to see me pointing. I think you can see at the Lactelle lies towards the top end of the dark area of peatlands in the country outlined there, which is Republic of Congo. The dark area of peatlands are very extensive. This is a region called the Cuvette Centrale, which lies in the Republic of Congo and also in the Democratic Republic of Congo next door. And it's an area that's long been known to hold peat, but it's only in the last few years that the incredible scale of the peat resource here has become understood through work led by Greta Darji and Simon Lewis, along with many other collaborators. The peat extent is roughly the same as the size of England, and as an Englishman I find that impressive, but others in the world may be more impressed to know that it contains around the equivalent of around 30 gigatons of CO2. That's roughly equivalent to all the forest carbon stocks in the rest of the Congo basin, concentrated in just 4% of the land area. It's also equivalent to about 20 years of carbon dioxide emissions from the US. So it's a hugely important ecosystem from the point of view of ensuring the stability of the global climate, and it's absolutely critical that we identify ways to manage it and conserve it effectively whilst enabling development for the people that live within it. So we hope that some of the lessons that are emerging from the community reserve are applicable more widely. Next slide, please. So the peatlands as a whole are have historically been under low to moderate threat, particularly on the Republic of Congo side, where population densities are lowest, but this is changing and threats are rising over time. There are threats from climate change itself, in that there may be changes in the hydrology of the region. There are also significant threats from rising pressures from land use. This includes agriculture, including industrial agriculture, the expansion of timber harvesting into some of the shallower peatland areas, mining, and oil and gas exploration is taking place on an increasingly large scale and may signal a significant rise in threats in the future. Some parts of the peatland complex, like Lactelle, are protected. Many of them currently are not. Next slide, please. So this is an example of one of the current on the ground threats. This is an area of a seasonally dry area within the complex, which has been burnt. Fire is not currently a threat to the peatlands themselves, but it is affecting forests in some of the dryland areas within the complex, and that's I think that's as pressures rise, that's an indicator of one of the things that may become more serious in the future. Next slide, please. So we're at a climate conference. I'm talking first about the climate values, but this is not just a stock of carbon. This is a large, intact, healthy, resilient ecosystem with a whole diversity of values and provides a whole range of ecosystem services, which are provided spread across three main habitat types. Firstly, we have the dryland forests, or the terra firme forests, which make up a minority of the area but have the highest species richness and have a concentration of some of the rarest terrestrial biodiversity. They hold a lot of carbon above ground, but less carbon than the peat areas. Next slide, please. The majority of the area is dominated by these flooded forests, which are permanently flooded and have a lower diversity of highly specialized trees and other plants that are able to grow in these environments. And this is where the peat has been accumulating over many thousands of years, and in many areas is now more than 5 meters deep and holds vast quantities of carbon. Next slide, please. Oh, I just realized all this. And the third significant habitat are the flooded grasslands along the major river corridors, which are flooded in the wet season, dry in the dry season, and form really important transport corridors and concentrations, and provide key habitats for a lot of the avian diversity of the area. Huge concentrations of water birds use this area at certain times of the year. So a few examples of the biodiversity we're talking about here. I mentioned the exceptional densities of gorillas Here's a camera trap picture of some gorillas walking through the terra firma forest. There's also a complete complement of other species of animal. Here's a leopard lurking in the background of another camera trap image. And the presence of large carnivores, of course, indicates a healthy prey base below that. And there are also very large populations of chimpanzees in the region. Announcement, so I'm going to pause for a second. Continue. Okay, thank you. And there are, of course, vast and very diverse populations of fish in the wetlands, which benefit from the seasonal transition from floods into the forests to come out of the river systems and feed on a lot of the terrestrial biomass and fruit and so forth in the rainy season, which really drives the productivity of the system. So if we look at the vegetation map of the reserve, we see that beautiful lake at the center. The darker areas are the peat-dominated flooded forests. The paler areas are the islands of dryland forest, and the blue and purple represent the grasslands and permanent wetlands along the main river courses. And we've done an analysis of the species likely to be the vertebrate species likely to be present in the region. Of 1,000 vertebrates suspected to be present, a good 10% of them are at some level of conservation concern. So it's a really important conservation story here. And this chart gives a sense of that. On the far right, there are the threatened the mammals of conservation concern, including some that are critically endangered globally. And on the left, there's a very high column showing the many fish species which are of conservation concern in the area, including a high proportion which are simply data deficient, and so indicating how poorly known and how poorly understood their ecology is, and that the reserve is contributing to the survival of all of these species. Now, in the face of the importance of the area and the challenges to it, WCS has been working in the region since before the establishment of the reserve, and we think applying some of the models that we've found successful in other parts of Central Africa, and also trying to adapt models to the specific conditions of this region. So I'm going to talk you through 2 or 3 of the main parts of the model as it currently operates. One part is to engage with trying to reduce illegal hunting and manage hunting, especially of the ecologically important species, which are so significant for maintaining the functioning of the area. We support Congolese government efforts and employ eco guards to work alongside government officials, provide them training in both strategy and tactics for effective law enforcement, human rights aspects, and outreach with local communities to ensure that their work is well understood, well respected by local stakeholders. And there's also a dedicated wildlife crimes unit which is tasked with investigating cases and bringing them to court. So under Congolese law, some species can be hunted at any time, although not for commercial trade. Some species can be hunted during open seasons, but not in closed seasons. Some species are totally protected. And we've worked with the government and local communities to put in place a wildlife monitoring system that enables us to track the distribution and trends in some of the most threatened species over time. It's a huge effort to achieve that in this very challenging wetland environment. But every 5 years, big teams go out and cover the whole region, not just of Lactelle, but right up to the CAR border. And this map shows the distribution of gorillas in that broader landscape. The red oval shows the Lactelle part of the landscape, and you can see it's part of a huge sort of broad population of gorillas across that whole landscape, with Lactelle having significant concentrations. And we believe there's around 7,000 gorillas in Lactelle alone, and those numbers appear to be growing over time. A contrast to that is the dwarf crocodile. This is a species that can be harvested for consumption, but is not cannot be traded legally. Nonetheless, there's quite a significant illegal trade out of the area. Around 10,000 crocodiles a year are believed to leave the landscape, and so we're working very actively to try to prevent those removals, to return live animals in trade back to the wild, and to work with local communities to establish sustainable harvesting practices. Third example of how we're trying to understand the ecology of the landscape and the threatened species is elephants. It's quite an important landscape for elephants, again, especially the dryland islands and the seasonally dry wetland areas. Elephants are very difficult to monitor, especially so in this region, and with a history of hunting for ivory. But we're increasingly developing a picture of their movements through collaboration with sort of experts within the villages, and we're getting a sense of how much this landscape, how much this reserve, whilst very large, is just a part of a broader landscape. The elephants are just one example of species which move in and out of the reserve in the course of the seasonal fluctuations, and so it's very important to see this site in the context of the broader wetland environment that it's in. We're also tracking water bird populations quite closely. In the interest of time, I'll come on to the final part of the model, which is the issue of community-based conservation. So our focus here is a dual one on trying to enable sustainable development for those 20,000 plus people that live in the region, and also to help them to strengthen governance of the natural resources and lands on which they depend. So a lot of that work is around helping to develop local natural resource governance groups. Some of these are pre-existing associations that we're collaborating with. Some of them are groups that we've enabled to be established, and we're helping to build their capacity, help them to both to manage their own processes and to engage effectively with communities that they represent. We conduct a lot of outreach to help people understand the legal framework and some of the natural resource management issues, the coming pressures from climate change and so forth. And we also provide assistance to these governance groups in a whole range of ways. Practically, in terms of what these groups do, there's been a strong focus over the first part of the life of the reserve in helping to establish sustainable management practices for the fisheries, because these are so absolutely critical to people's livelihoods. Around 90% of protein comes from these fisheries, and so we've helped these groups to agree and establish and enforce and monitor rules for how their fisheries resources should be managed. And I think we're seeing really quite good results there. We've also, in parallel with that, been working on rural development activities focused on agricultural development and other revenue generating activities. This is in a context of high poverty levels and really very remote communities. It's very difficult for these communities to engage with market-based livelihood opportunities because it's so hard to bring things to market. It can take many hours, if not days, to get to even to local markets, let alone to sort of district and regional markets. So we help a lot with sort of intensification of of subsistence livelihood opportunities like poultry and honey and food crops. We've also identified cacao as something which is so non-perishable that can be grown in these areas and then transported to markets quite effectively. So we're increasingly working with communities to do that. And over the coming years, we're just in the early stages of developing models for enhancing sustainable harvesting models for wildlife as well, for those species which can be legally harvested. So this is my last slide, and this is an illustration of an event that was part of the 20th anniversary celebrations of Lactelle Community Reserve, established in 2001. It's now 2021, and this was a lovely event, large-scale event. Many people came from all the participating communities, from local government and from the national level. And this reconfirmed our sense of the excellent relationships that have been built with these local groups over 20 years of patient work, particularly enabled by employing local people as community facilitators for a lot of the activities. So I'd just like to close by coming back to zooming out again to the national level and flagging the importance of bringing these kind of site level activities back into the discussion around national processes for ensuring the future of these wetlands. The Republic of Congo has indicated a high level goal to ensure the survival of these peatlands long term. That's hugely valuable, and is now moving forwards with a national land use planning process, a systematic land use planning process. It'll try to bring in the interests of all stakeholders with support from the Central African Forest Initiative, CAFI, and it's really important that process results in a clear long-term management status for these peatlands beyond the reserve. Currently, none of them have any particular formal legal designation. It's almost certainly not appropriate for all of the peatlands to become reserves. Nonetheless, I think some sort of legal designation which recognizes their huge environmental value and creates a basis for long-term sustainable management with involvement of local communities is absolutely critical to move towards. And this approach also needs to prepare all the stakeholders with the tools they're going to need to address the rising external pressures that these landscapes face. And on that hopefully positive note, I will close and hand back to Hans.
Thank you, Tom, and that was amazing. What we've seen today over the last hour and a bit is two amazing projects. One in Russia, and two areas in Russia where by peatland restoration and conservation is absolutely critical. We're here at COP, so the climate adaptation and the climate mitigation angles are really critical. And one in the Congo. We've got some questions that's come in via via online, but since I'm running this session, I've got the great opportunity actually to ask my questions first myself. So I've got a question here, and I hope I've got our colleagues from Russia as well still on the chat. Tatiana and my colleagues in Russia. In the second example, in the Congo, we really clearly saw how the conservation of the Congo Basin and the areas around Lactelle had a really positive impact for people and directly tuned into their livelihoods. Can you tell us a bit on how the Russian project works with people and with livelihoods on the ground?
Alexei or me?
I don't mind either of you who would like to answer that, Tatiana.
Alexei, could you address with the work with indigenous people in Khanty-Mansiysk?
Yeah, just I can speak a little bit on that. Actually, wetlands and peatlands are the natural areas of life for local people, for hunting and for their natural way of living. So it's really important to preserve these ecosystems, and in this way, I believe it's crucial for people and has a huge impact on their lives.
Thank you. Tatiana, would you like to comment on that as well?
Yeah, indeed. If you go to Khanty-Mansiysk to Siberia, as Alexei told this, and this is crucial. And actually, Khanty-Mansiysk Okrug Yugra has several protected areas, huge protected areas like Park Numto, the Kandinsky lakes, where the indigenous people can also use the intact peatlands, but also there is the practices to look how the development of the area could be also balanced with the needs of indigenous people. And there's hard dialogues, sometimes very hard dialogues, but now we are trying to introduce this concept of ecosystem services in also in Yugra University. We have even special course for that, and we try to introduce this to the practice of the companies, that the cost benefit analysis during the due diligence, during the strategic impact assessment, assess also the services which peatlands are bringing. And in Petro's project, actually, and also in this Arctic projects, which I touched very on the surface, we try now to also introduce these methods and to develop how we can bring this economical sound incentives for the wise use of peatlands, and how we can calculate the profit for people. Yeah, so this should be really good cost benefit analysis. And now in the Petros project, in this phase, we actually have the special investigation for that planned. In Arctic, we have a running project supported by the Belmont Forum with the Russian Fund of Fundamental Research, which is actually and together with CAF, which is actually called the enhancing of resilience due wetland to climate change of local communities to or to social ecological systems to climate change due to wetlands restoration. Yeah, so it is just the topic of the project, and the project is quite successful and quite good with many CAF and Arctic Council partners. So I mean, this work is on the way, but taking into account this complexity of this process, yeah, that we always have to look at the local level on the needs of people, but also we need some economic development, and this is actually the contradiction which we have now, and discussions which we have now in the COP, and this all protests which we have nearby. Yeah, it's coming about how much of development is to people, yeah, and how much is to the large capital, which is also needed for development, but this balance, yeah. So it is quite a difficult thing, and in Congo, I think also we come to this question, and how to balance this. Yeah, because in Congo, I know a lot of companies is coming with the leases to this peatland also. Yeah, and this is something that we have to assist, and maybe also to decide on the political level, and maybe also to bring to the decisions in this conference.
Thank you, Tatiana. From our guests online. It's great to hear how people are central to the solution. And I think it's always heartwarming for me, because I've got friends and family that grew up on peatlands. My mom, when she recounts stories from her childhood in the Netherlands, she was going out with her father to take peat for fuel from the peatlands. So the peatlands and the interaction between people and the peatlands has always been absolutely amazing. So for me, that human angle is critical, because the way and how we reach out from within here, within COP, to outside to the world, that we need to bring with us is through people and through our own memories and our own families. That brings me really nicely to a question for Tom. And I've got this name now, or the organization right now. It's the Wildlife Conservation Society. Thank you, Tom. I've got a question here. At the beginning of your presentation, you showed us the eye-watering quantities of peatland of carbon stored within the Congo Basin, within the Cuvette Centrale. It's absolutely massive. Have you got any idea about the sequestration potential within there? Because when we step away from the people and we think about global companies interested in contributing and helping and fund these kind of management practices, they're also interested not only in the emissions avoided, and that's why the Peat Rust project, for example, are really easily or relatively easily to get funding for, but also companies are increasingly getting interested into the sequestration side on the absorption of the carbon dioxide and the greenhouse gases from the atmosphere and locking it up. Can you tell us a little bit about the knowledge around that? Because that would be really interesting.
Thank you. Yes, so that is not my particular area of expertise, but I can tell you a little. So as far as I'm aware, the peatlands are continuing to sequester additional carbon. They're continuing to grow more. You know, the trees grow, they fall into the water, they fail to rot because of the very anoxic conditions in those permanent wetlands, and so these are not moss-based peatlands like in Russia. These are mostly made up of woody material, and they are continuing to accumulate carbon over time, I think, and have been for many, many thousands of years. As I mentioned at the start, the understanding of the ecologies of these areas is quite new. It's only 2 or 3 years since the first, really detailed studies were conducted. I was talking to a member of that team just the other day, Professor Simon Lewis, and he said they had a new set of studies that they've been putting together. They've been refining their understanding from the first round of studies, and are getting a sense of the history of these peatlands and how they've accumulated over time. So I suspect quite soon they'll be releasing some data that give us a sense, at least, of the long-term accumulation rates of carbon. I think it may be a little while before we can tell how much is accumulating each year right now. It's a tricky process to figure out, even whether vegetation is this tall, let alone when it's 20 meters tall.
Absolutely. No, thank you. And sorry to putting you on the spot, but I think it's really important, especially here at COP, where we talk about climate and we talk about not only the emissions, but also on the adaptation side of things, to keep that in our mind. And as this stand is being organized, it's called the Global Peatlands, or the Peatland Pavilion. It's co-organized and is definitely led by the Global Peatlands Initiative. So we're standing there shoulder to shoulder with you and with organizations like you to help and share that knowledge, because it's critical that we do this together. And the UNEP organized Global Peatland Initiative would like to keep working with you on that and see how we can bring that knowledge from anywhere around the world to move that forward. We've got good knowledge in Indonesia and in Asia, which is much more transferable to what's happening in Africa. We've done work in Africa as well, and we done work in Latin America, so we can bring that knowledge together and help move forward. Because it's always critical to get the right funding in there. And as you say, the people on the ground, their livelihoods, even getting the crops and the produce to market will take a long time. So the incentives there might be not only based around products, but also could be raised about the carbon sequestration potential and the emissions avoided. So it would be really nice to see how we can bring funding into that area to move things forward.
Can I respond to that just
Absolutely.
briefly? Yes, thank you very much for bringing up that point. I was not able in the time I had available to acknowledge all the other participants in conserving the peatlands in this region. And yes, I would. The work that the Global Peatlands Initiative is doing, engaging with the government on supporting governance and knowledge sharing, and also interaction between other countries is hugely valuable. And I think the commitment that the Republic of Congo government made to the conservation of these peatlands 2 or 3 years ago was actually in the context of a broader declaration that included the DRC and Indonesia. I think, in the context of that global initiative. So I think that's very important.
Thank you, Tom. I've got a question here coming in here from our online audience, and as this is a fully hybrid event, it's always great to see that interplay between people here on the ground and our online audience. To our colleagues in Russia, what's the attitude of the Russian public towards peatland restoration? What's that mindset? Where do people see these people see it as being important, or is there a growing awareness? Tatiana and colleagues, can you answer this, please?
So I think this is the question will be addressed to me, because what in Khanty-Mansiysk is going on, it is not so restoration like the avoidance and the proper planning. Yeah. So of course there are some spots which are destroyed by companies, and this is the company obligations. So they are restoring peatlands after their activities, and then they can of course calculate these reductions to their reporting to the companies. Yeah. But this is like something which is must. Yeah. So it is in the legislation, it is in law. There are areas with which Petrus is dealing in the European part of Russia. This is the result of our economic changes. Yeah, this perestroika, when the peat industry, which was supported by the Soviet government, actually didn't stand the market. Yeah, and there was no anymore such a need of peat, because the energy is produced now from oil and gas, mainly now it's changing to gas, the stations around Moscow. So these areas were annoying people also. Yeah, so it is not like yes, you are right that there is the problem of the perception of peatland. Yeah, the peatlands traditionally, from the, I don't know, fairy tales or for the films or for the books, they are perceived negatively. Yeah, by people. They say, oh, you spent money to restore peatlands, do something good. Yeah, but instead, yeah. But now I think it's already going back because people understand that it's better to have the natural areas there, like for hunting, for recreation, for the water regulation, for the other than permanently burning this bare peat, horrible, terrifying lunar landscapes sites. Yeah. So and this was a lot of this, and just due to this economic situation, yeah, we got this unmanaged peatlands, which were just they were abandoned just in the middle of the extraction. Yeah, so this was the problem.
Absolutely, and it's good to hear that, Tatiana. And actually, would like to fire that same question to Tom. You talked a lot about people and the value and the way on how people interact around Lactelle, on the amazing success story that you shared. But what's the people and what's their connection and their attitude towards peatland conservation? Can you give me a couple of words, and then I'll start wrapping up this session?
Certainly, yes. I don't think that the people that live there see the conservation of those areas as not useful. It's their entire livelihood. I mean, it's where they live, and so I mean these remote communities are very heavily dependent on natural resources for both for their material needs, but also it's their cultural and sort of spiritual home is there as well. So it goes throughout their culture. And their own activities pose almost no threat to the peatlands themselves. So there's no tension there between those two outcomes.
Thank you, and thank you, Tom. And it's my honor actually to start wrapping up this session. I'm really proud to stand up here today in our Wetlands Pavilion at COP to talk about two such amazing, inspiring examples. One very focused on a dire need, peatlands burning, but also from that an understanding about the climate change impact that it has, the emissions that are coming from these damaged peatlands, the knowledge build, tying it in with governance, tying it in communities, and ending that up on NDCs. A huge amount of work that's been done, and I'm really proud to be part of it. On the other side, a massive and absolutely I can't find it hard to comprehend the size of the Cuvette Centrale and of the Congo peatlands.
The size of England, I told you.
I know, and the size of England is, I've lived now in the UK 27 years and I travel frequently up and down, and it is massively, it's eye-watering big how big these peatlands are. So on that side, a much more intact peatland whereby we need to help and we need to support and we need to ensure that the amazing biodiversity, the species you've shown, the people that live there and interact sustainably with the land and with the peatlands, that we preserve that and that we help them to maintain that. But also for me, that we bring some of that knowledge, of that connectiveness and that spiritual relationship back into those areas where that disconnect has happened. Because in the end of the day, people matter. And people drive this forward, and businesses are important, but people drive this forward as well. So thank you, all speakers, both online and physically here with me, to share these two success stories with me. And I'm really, really pleased to be able to share this morning. Thank you. And there is always space later on to come together and talk further about this. And our Peatland Pavilion and the Global Peatland Initiative are an amazing space to help and to have these conversations further. And with that, I'm going to close this session and thank you all for your attendance and your support.